Moving to the suburbs was supposed to be my ticket to peace, quiet, and maybe a backyard where I could sip coffee without someone's car alarm screaming in my ear. I'm Greg, 28, single, and freshly escaped from a shoebox apartment in the city. I'd saved up for years to buy a modest little house in Willow Creek, a neighborhood that promised green lawns, friendly neighbors, and the kind of serenity you see in toothpaste commercials. Spoiler alert, I got none of that. Instead, I got Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the suburbs, part-time HOA tyrant, and full-time menace to my sanity. The first time I met Karen, I was unloading boxes from my beat-up hatchback. I'd barely set foot on my new driveway when I heard it. A voice like a chainsaw trying to sing opera, slicing through the humid August air. "Excuse me, sir," she said, clutching a clipboard like it was the One Ring. "That vehicle is parked 2 inches over the line. HOA regulations state." I didn't catch the rest because I was too busy staring at her perm, which looked like it had been styled by a vengeful poodle. She handed me a neon yellow citation for improper parking and marched off, her sensible loafers clicking like a metronome set to tyrant mode. I laughed it off at first. A one-off, right? Wrong. Karen was everywhere. Her clipboard was her scepter, her glare could wilt a cactus, and her citations were her love language. Forgot to mow your lawn by Tuesday? Fine. Left your trash bin out past 6 p.m.? Fine. Breathed too loudly on your own porch? Believe me, she'd find a way to fine you for that too. But her true passion, her raison d'etre, was towing cars. Karen didn't just tow vehicles. She orchestrated their removal like a conductor leading a symphony of misery. Every time a tow truck rumbled into Willow Creek, you could see her practically glowing, her ego topped off like a gas tank at a shady station. My first month was a crash course in Karen's reign. I got fines for excessive mailbox tilt. It was windy, Karen, and unapproved porch furniture. It was a folding chair. But the real kicker? She tried to tow my car. Twice. The first time, I caught the tow truck driver hooking up my hatchback because I'd parked it too close to a hydrant. It was 15 feet away. I sprinted out, still in socks, and begged him to stop. He shrugged, muttered something about orders, and left after I slipped him a $20. The second time, I wasn't so lucky. I came home from work to find my car gone, a $200 towing fee, and a note from Karen citing unauthorized overnight parking. I'd parked in my own driveway. Apparently, it was too diagonal. I guarded my car as best I could, but Karen's notebook never slept. She'd patrol the neighborhood at dawn, her neon vest reflecting the sunrise like a warning beacon. Neighbors whispered about her like she was a suburban Voldemort. "Don't cross Karen," they'd say, their eyes darting like they expected her to pop out from behind a hedge. I tried to stay under the radar, but it was like trying to avoid a heat-seeking missile with a personal vendetta. The tension was building, and I was one citation away from losing it. Then, a lifeline. My old buddy Mike called out of the blue. Mike's the kind of guy who'd bring a flamethrower to a campfire. Larger than life, zero filter, and, as I'd soon learn, the perfect weapon against Karen. "Yo, Greg," he said, his voice crackling through my phone. "Fishing trip this weekend. You in?" I groaned, explaining I'd love to, but I had to finish some chores and, more importantly, figure out where to hide my car so Karen wouldn't tow it while I was gone. I spilled the whole saga. Karen, her clipboard, the fines, the towing obsession. Mike laughed so hard I thought he'd choke. "This can't be real," he said. I sighed. "Yeah, I'd have said that too, before I moved here." Mike's tone shifted, all business. "Listen, man, we're going fishing. No suburban dictator's gonna stop us." "She's got a clipboard? Cute. I've got something better, a sheriff's badge. Let's see whose power wins." My jaw dropped. Mike had mentioned he'd moved up in law enforcement, but sheriff? That was news. We made a plan. He'd pick me up Friday after work. We'd head out for the weekend, and Karen could shove her citations where the sun didn't shine. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Or maybe it was just the thrill of impending chaos. I spent the week prepping, half expecting Karen to slap a fine on my fishing rods for unapproved outdoor equipment. By Friday, I was buzzing with anticipation. Mike rolled up in his unmarked SUV, looking like he'd just stepped out of a buddy cop movie. Jeans, flannel, and a grin that screamed trouble. We were catching up over coffee in my kitchen when I heard it. The low rumble of a tow truck. My stomach dropped. I bolted to the window and saw it. A tow truck backing up to Mike's SUV, its claw poised like a vulture. And there, striding across my lawn like a general at a parade, was Karen, waving her arms and barking orders. I threw open the door. "Karen, what the hell is this?" I yelled, my voice cracking with disbelief. She didn't even blink. "This vehicle is in violation," she said, her tone as flat as a robot reading a script. "Unauthorized parking during non-visitor hours." I gaped. "It's my guest. He's been here for, like, 15 minutes. Karen just repeated, "It's forbidden." I swear, if she'd had a whip, she'd have cracked it. I was standing on my front porch, watching Karen orchestrate her latest towing spectacle like she was directing a low-budget action movie. Her clipboard gleamed in the Friday evening glow, her voice, think nails on a chalkboard mixed with a malfunctioning car alarm, barking at the tow truck driver. My buddy Mike's SUV was seconds away from being hoisted away, and I was yelling at Karen, trying to reason with someone who'd clearly traded her logic for a power trip. "Karen, this is my guest," I shouted again, my socks soaking up the dew from my lawn. "He's been here for 15 minutes. Her response? Again a cold, robotic, "It's forbidden." I swear, her eyes had the dead stare of a shark circling its prey. Then Mike stepped out of the house, calm as a summer lake, coffee mug in hand, looking like he'd just heard a mildly amusing dad joke, and I knew things were about to get interesting. The tow truck driver was fiddling with the claw, Karen was waving her arms like a traffic cop on a sugar high, and I was bracing for World War clipboard. Mike, though, cool as a cucumber. He sauntered over to the tow truck driver, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his sheriff's badge. The driver froze, his wrench clattering to the pavement. "Sheriff Mike Callahan," Mike said, his voice smooth but with an edge that could cut steel. "Mind unhooking my vehicle?" The driver didn't even blink. He scrambled to release the claw faster than you can say HOA nightmare. Karen, mid-stride, didn't notice at first. She was too busy scribbling something on her clipboard, probably a fine for my lawn's unauthorized due levels. Mike turned to her, badge still in hand, and said, "Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to explain why you're trying to tow my car." Karen's head snapped up, her perm quivering like it sensed danger. She clutched her clipboard tighter, like it was a shield against reality. "This vehicle is in violation of HOA regulations," she said, her voice wobbling just enough to betray her. "Non-residents can't park during weekday hours." Mike raised an eyebrow, the kind of look that says, "Oh, you're that kind of idiot." "It's Friday, 6 p.m., he said. "I'm a guest, parked in my friend's driveway. Where's the violation?" Karen's face twitched, her lips pursing like she'd sucked on a lemon. "It's forbidden," she stammered, falling back on her favorite catchphrase. "I couldn't help it," I snorted. Loudly. Karen shot me a glare that could have curdled milk, but I was too busy enjoying the show. Mike didn't raise his voice, but every word landed like a sledgehammer. "Let's try this again," he said. "Your HOA rules don't override state law. Towing a legally parked vehicle without notice is theft. You want to keep going." Karen's confidence was cracking like cheap plaster. She tried to rally, flipping through her clipboard like it held the secrets of the universe. "The bylaws clearly state," she started, but Mike cut her off. "Bylaws don't trump the law, ma'am. You're on thin ice." I was practically vibrating with glee, but the tension was still thick. Karen wasn't backing down. She was too deep in her suburban dictator fantasy. She squared her shoulders, her loafers digging into my lawn like she was claiming it for the HOA. "I'm the president of this association," she said, her voice hitting that opera chainsaw pitch again. "I have authority." Mike just smiled, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse before pouncing. "Authority, huh? Funny thing about that. You search for trouble, you find it. And you just found me." Then he pulled out his phone, and I knew things were about to escalate. "Dispatch, this is Callahan," he said, his tone all business. "Send a unit to 47 Willow Creek Drive. We've got an attempted illegal tow, possible abuse of authority, and he paused, locking eyes with Karen, who was now pale enough to blend into her beige cardigan. I'm suspecting misappropriation of HOA funds by the president. Get someone from economic crimes down here for a full audit. Karen gasped so loud I thought she'd sucked all the oxygen out of the neighborhood. Her clipboard slipped an inch, and I swear I saw her knees wobble. Mike hung up, snapped a few photos of the tow truck and Karen's license plate, and turned to me. Grab your fishing gear, Greg. We're done here. I blinked, still processing the fact that my buddy had just turned Karen's power trip into a crime scene. I bolted to the garage, grabbing my rods and cooler, while Karen stood frozen, her empire crumbling faster than her perm in a rainstorm. The tow truck driver, sensing the heat, was already climbing into his cab. Ma'am, he called to Karen. You're gonna need to cover the call-out fee for this. Karen's face went from pale to volcanic red. She stomped her foot, nearly swinging her clipboard at him like a medieval flail. As Mike and I piled into his SUV, I caught a glimpse of flashing lights at the end of the street. A patrol car was rolling in, right on cue. I couldn't resist. I leaned out the window and gave a cheery wave to Karen, who was now arguing with the tow truck driver while clutching her precious clipboard like a life raft. Mike honked the horn, a jaunty little beep-beep, and we peeled out, laughing so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Man, he said, his eyes on the road. I thought Karen horror stories were just Reddit myths. I grinned, catching my breath. Yeah, me too. Until I moved here. We cackled, the tension of the past weeks melting away as we headed for the lake. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt like I'd won a round. But Karen wasn't done, not yet. She was down, but not out, and I had a feeling her clipboard wasn't ready to retire. The lake was everything Willow Creek wasn't. Calm, quiet, and blissfully free of clipboard-wielding tyrants. Mike and I spent the weekend fishing, the sun glinting off the water, the air filled with the smell of pine and the occasional whiff of our terrible campfire coffee. My phone was off, my car was finally safe, and for 48 hours, I forgot Karen existed. We reeled in a couple of bass, swapped stories about our college days, and laughed about the look on Karen's face when Mike flashed his sheriff's badge. Man, I said, casting my line. I thought she was going to faint when you mentioned the audit. Mike chuckled, cracking open a soda. Thought those HOA horror stories were urban legends. Guess you're living proof they're real. Tell me about it. I muttered, my hook snagging a weed. I moved here for peace, not to play dodgeball with a suburban dictator. Mike shook his head. She's got no idea who she's messing with. That audit's going to hit her like a freight train. I grinned, imagining Karen buried under a pile of spreadsheets, her perm deflating like a sad balloon. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt like I could breathe. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to slink away quietly. Her ego was too big, her clipboard too mighty. We drove back Sunday evening, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. As we turned into Willow Creek, I half expected to see Karen patrolling with a flashlight, ready to find me for excessive weekend relaxation. But the neighborhood was eerily quiet. No neon vest, no opera chainsaw voice. Just kids riding bikes and a guy mowing his lawn without fear of a citation. This place looks normal, Mike said, squinting like he'd entered an alternate dimension. Yeah, I replied. That's what scares me. Mike dropped me off, promising to keep me posted on the audit. I waved as he drove away, then lugged my fishing gear inside. I'd barely set my cooler down when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my neighbor, Tom, a grizzled retiree who'd once whispered, "Karen's got spies everywhere," like he was in a Cold War thriller. He was holding a six-pack of craft beer, his face split in a grin. "Greg," he said, shoving the cans into my hands, "you're a damn hero." I blinked. "Oh, what?" He shook my hand so hard I thought my arm would fall off, said, "Thank you," and shuffled off into the dusk. I stood there, clutching the beer, wondering if I'd missed a memo. 2 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Mrs. Nguyen from across the street, holding a tray of homemade brownies. "For you," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you for standing up to her." She hugged me. awkwardly, since I was still holding the beer, and left. Before I could close the door, another neighbor showed up with a jar of homemade jam. Then another with a gift card to the local diner. By the time the parade stopped, my kitchen counter looked like a potluck buffet, and I was thoroughly confused. I called Tom, figuring he'd know what was going on. "What's with the gifts?" I asked. He laughed, a raspy smoker's chuckle. "You didn't hear? While you were off fishing, the sheriff's office sent in the big guns. Detectives, accountants, the works. They're auditing the HOA, and Karen's in deep. Word is, she's been skimming funds for years. Fancy vacations, new furniture, you name it." My jaw dropped. "Skimming? Like stealing?" Tom snorted. "Yup, and your sheriff buddies call lit the fuse. Neighborhood's calling you the Karen Slayer." I hung up, my head spinning. Mike's audit threat wasn't just a power move. It had unleashed a reckoning. I pictured Karen, her clipboard useless against a swarm of forensic accountants, and couldn't help but cackle. But the tension wasn't gone. Karen was still out there, probably plotting her comeback. I spent the next few days on edge, peeking out my windows for signs of her neon vest. The neighborhood stayed quiet, but it felt like the calm before a storm. Then, on Wednesday, I got a text from Mike. "Audit's turning up gold. Karen's in hot water. Stay tuned." I was about to reply when I heard a commotion outside. I opened my door to see two detectives knocking on Karen's door, clipboards of their own. Ironic, right? A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, whispering and sipping coffee like they were at a block party. Karen's curtains twitched, but she didn't answer. One detective taped a notice to her door, and the crowd buzzed with excitement. I caught Mrs. Nguyen's eye, and she gave me a thumbs up. That night, Tom filled me in. The detectives had been canvassing the neighborhood, taking statements. Apparently, Karen's reign of terror had left a long paper trail. Fake fines, forged signatures, even a secret emergency fund she'd used to buy a hot tub. Neighbors were spilling everything, from her bullying tactics to her habit of losing complaints against her. "She's done," Tom said, sounding downright gleeful. "They're talking fraud, embezzlement, the works." I went to bed feeling like I'd won the lottery, but the victory was bittersweet. Karen wasn't in cuffs yet, and I knew she'd fight dirty. Her silence was unnerving, like a snake waiting to strike. Little did I know, her downfall was closer than I thought, and it was going to be glorious. The days after the detectives showed up felt like Willow Creek had been doused in fairy dust. No citations fluttered onto my porch, no tow trucks rumbled down the street, and I didn't once hear Karen's opera chainsaw voice shredding the morning calm. I, Greg, reluctant hero of the suburbs, was starting to believe we'd toppled the tyrant. My kitchen counter was still buried under neighborly gifts, beer, brownies, even a hand-knitted scarf from Mrs. Nguyen's aunt, who I'd never met. The neighborhood was throwing me a parade without the floats, and I was eating it up. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to vanish quietly. Her clipboard was probably plotting revenge in a dark corner somewhere. By Friday, the rumors were flying faster than mosquitoes at a barbecue. Tom, my grizzled neighbor turned intel source, cornered me while I was checking my mailbox, carefully, in case Karen had rigged it with a fine for insufficiently patriotic flag placement. "They got her dead to rights," he said, his eyes gleaming like he'd just won the lottery. "Audit found thousands missing from the HOA account. Karen's been funding her beach vacations and that tacky hot tub with our dues." I whistled. "She's been what?" Tom grinned. "Oh, it gets better. They found emails where she bragged about teaching us peasants a lesson. She's toast." I should have felt triumphant, but the quiet was unnerving. Karen's house was dark, her neon vest nowhere in sight. It was like the eye of Sauron had blinked out, and I didn't trust it. I texted Mike for an update, and he replied with a cryptic, "She's digging her own grave. Wait for it." I tried to focus on work, but every creak of my porch had me peeking out the window, expecting Karen to emerge like a suburban zombie, clipboard raised. But the real show was yet to come. That afternoon, a sheriff's deputy, not Mike, but one of his colleagues, showed up with another notice for Karen's door. The WhatsApp group lit up again. "It's a summons. Fraud charges. She's done for." Then, on Saturday morning, it happened. I was sipping coffee, enjoying the rare sound of birds instead of Karen's voice, when a U-Haul truck rolled into her driveway. The neighborhood WhatsApp group. Yes, we had one. And yes, it was usually just Mrs. and Gwen posting cat memes. Exploded. Karen's moving. Saw her packing boxes. Good riddance. I jogged outside, joining a small crowd of neighbors pretending to water their lawns or walk their dogs. Karen's front door opened, and there she was, but not the Karen we knew. No clipboard, no perm puffed up like a dictator's crown. She was hunched, wearing a Panama hat and oversized sunglasses, looking like she was auditioning for a witness protection program. She didn't make eye contact with anyone, just scurried to her car while movers hauled out furniture. I caught Tom's eye across the street, and he mimed wiping a tear, then flipped her house the bird. Classy. I couldn't help but smirk. Karen, the queen who'd find me for unapproved grass height, was slinking away like a dog caught raiding the trash. I called Mike, who was chuckling before I even said hello. Told you to wait for it, he said. They've got her on embezzlement, forgery, and a laundry list of HOA violations. She's facing civil and criminal charges. Had to sell the house to cover legal fees and avoid jail. I leaned against my porch railing, grinning like an idiot. You're telling me she's actually gone? Not just gone, Mike said. Humiliated. She sent an email to the HOA board last night, resigning as president. Didn't even show up to a meeting. Just a sad little PDF attachment titled Resignation. Pathetic. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Karen, who'd once fined me for excessive porch loitering, yes, really, had been reduced to an email nobody cared about. The neighborhood was free. But the cherry on top came later that day. I was grilling burgers in my backyard, without fear of a non-compliant smoke level fine, when Mrs. Nguyen stopped by with a fresh batch of brownies. You heard about the meeting? She asked, her eyes twinkling. I shook my head, mouth full of burger. HOA's holding an emergency meeting tonight, she said. They're electing a new president, and your name's on the ballot. I nearly choked. Me? I've been here 2 months. She shrugged. You stood up to Karen. That's enough. I showed up to the meeting, mostly to make sure it wasn't a prank. The community center was packed, neighbors whispering and stealing glances at me like I was some kind of suburban Robin Hood. Tom nominated me. Mrs. Nguyen seconded, and before I knew it, I was shaking hands and promising not to turn into clipboard Karen 2.0. I didn't want the job, but the thought of running the HOA with a shred of common sense was too tempting to pass up. As I walked home, the stars bright overhead, I realized Willow Creek felt different. Lighter. Like we'd all been holding our breath and finally exhaled. Willow Creek was a different beast now. No more neon vests stalking the dawn. No more citations fluttering onto my porch like cursed confetti. I, Greg, the guy who'd moved here dreaming of quiet coffee mornings, was somehow the new HOA president. Me, the anti-Karen, elected by a neighborhood drunk on freedom and Mrs. Nguyen's brownies. I'd accepted the role with a promise to keep things sane, no fines for unapproved mailbox vibes, or whatever nonsense Karen had cooked up. But as I settled into my new reality, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's story wasn't over. Tyrants like her don't just fade. They plot, they scheme, they clutch their clipboards in exile. A week after Karen's U-Haul vanished, I was sorting through HOA records in my dining room, surrounded by empty beer cans and half-eaten brownies from the neighbor's victory parade. The audit had unearthed a goldmine of Karen's sins, $12,000 siphoned into her personal account. Fake fines funneled into landscaping projects that never happened, even a $500 charge for HOA morale enhancement that funded her hot tub. The detectives were building a case, and the neighborhood WhatsApp group was a daily soap opera of updates. Karen's lawyer quit. She's selling her car. Heard she's hiding in her sister's basement. I savored every tidbit. Then, on a crisp Saturday morning, Mike rolled up in his SUV, his sheriff's badge glinting in the sun. He'd promised to swing by for coffee and a debrief, and I was ready to toast our victory over the suburban dictator. We sat on my porch, the air smelling of fresh-cut grass instead of Karen's perfume and malice combo. Neighborhood's unrecognizable, Mike said, sipping his coffee. You've got kids playing in the street, people waving at each other. What did you do, cast a spell? I laughed, clinking my mug against his. Nah, just got rid of the Wicked Witch. Thanks to you and your badge. Mike grinned, but his eyes had that cop sharpness. Don't thank me yet, he said. Karen's not done. Word is, she's trying to file a countersuit, claiming the HOA defamed her. Says she's the victim. I snorted so hard coffee nearly shot out my nose. Victim? She stole our money and tried to tow your car. Mike shrugged. Desperate people do desperate things. But she's got no leg to stand on. The evidence is airtight, and the judge isn't buying her sob story. I leaned back, savoring the thought of Karen flailing in court, her clipboard useless against a gavel. But Mike wasn't done. There's more, he said, pulling out his phone. He showed me a photo, a grainy shot of Karen at a gas station, Panama hat pulled low, arguing with a cashier. She's been spotted around town, acting like she's in a spy movie. My guys are keeping tabs. I raised an eyebrow. What's she planning, a comeback tour? Mike chuckled. Maybe, but she's got bigger problems. The audit's done, and they're freezing her accounts. She's toast. That night, the HOA held its first Karen-free meeting. I stood at the front of the community center, feeling like a substitute teacher in a room full of eager kids. We voted to dissolve half of Karen's bylaws, starting with the no guests on weekdays rule that had nearly cost Mike his SUV. The room erupted in cheers, and Tom raised a beer can in salute. To Greg, the Karen Slayer, he bellowed. I waved it off, but I was grinning like an idiot. For the first time, Willow Creek felt like home. Mike swung by the following weekend, and we sat on my porch, toasting with coffee mugs. Here's to fishing, I said, raising my cup. Mike clinked his against mine, smirking. And to catching big fish like Karen. We laughed, the sound echoing through a neighborhood that was finally, gloriously free. Willow Creek was ours again, and I'd learned one thing. Never underestimate the power of a sheriff's badge and a well-timed audit. As for Karen, rumor has it she's living in a condo 3 towns over, banned from ever joining an HOA again. I like to think she's staring at her old clipboard, dreaming of the days when she ruled with an iron perm. But me? I'm just happy to park my car in my driveway without a tow truck lurking. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.